All right, today let's jump into it. Warren Buffett, the greatest investor of our time, I think, has, of course, made some pretty amazing statements toward Bitcoin. We're going to break all that down. And also, where is Bitcoin going? Is this pre-Fed timing going to damage Bitcoin in a big way, or are we going to see a nice recovery bump off that? We're going to cover all that today. My name is Paul Barron. Welcome back into Tech Path. Let's get into the news, of course, and this is all about Mr. Warren Buffett. There's some strategies here that he has taken, and I'm also going to do some comparison because I want you guys to kind of see his performance versus Bitcoin. We'll show all that, give you guys some sentiment and some update data on Bitcoin. Again, remember, not investment advice when we do these market movers. The main thing is we're giving you guys insights, a little bit of data from our own CPI, but best thing is it's going to get you moving in the right direction. But it's up to you of how you play your money. All right, let's get into it. Warren Buffett said he wouldn't buy all of the Bitcoin in the world for 25 bucks. It doesn't produce anything among many companies that I do know that don't produce anything. But this is an old line investor that has really kind of taken, I think, a little bit of a line in the sand position. And unfortunately, anytime you take a line in the sand position, it just does not play well in the end. It never ages well, for sure. And if you look at just some of the things right here, Michael Saylor kind of bumps back and says, hey, wait a minute, I'll buy all your Bitcoin for 25 bucks. Again, I think just people are starting to really kind of get a little bit fed up with the approach that Munger and Warren Buffett have taken in terms of digital assets in general and kind of how they've approached it overall. Some of the things, of course, Elon is out there. Here's Mark Andreessen saying it's so wild he says stuff while nakedly shilling diabetes. I like that one. But here's the quote that everybody got upset about. And then, of course, there's Elon jumping in and saying, yeah, he says Bitcoin like 1,000,000 times.
You owned all of the Bitcoin in the world, and you offered it to me for $25. I wouldn't take it because what would I do with it? I have to sell it back to you one way or another. I mean, maybe I have the same people, but it isn't going to do anything. The apartments are going to produce rental, and the farms are going to produce food. And if I've got all the Bitcoin, I'm back where whatever his name was, who may or may not have existed, was 15 years ago. If I've got it all, he could create a mystery about it. But everybody knows what I'm like. I mean, so if I'm trying to get rid of it, people will say, well, why should I buy some Bitcoin from you? I mean, why don't you call it Buffett coin? Make your own or something. Do something. But
So you see, I mean, he really kind of does not understand how digital assets are really put together. I think when you look at the evolution of technology and how it's going to be used in the very early stages of technology, it's often approached just like what Warren Buffett approaches it with, and that is, why would I need that? Why would I use something like that instead of something I've used for the last 20 or 30 years? This happened in the age of the internet. It happened in pre-social media. This happened in pre-mobile. All of these things have occurred before. And the only difference is now we're edging in on Web3 and the evolution of what crypto assets will be and what that means to the world. And he does also make some statements around it also being evil, and that is because it undermines the federal currencies, which I think, in fact, helps create a better currency system and monetization system for the world, especially from a store of value, which is also another factor that kind of flows into this. So it's just sad to see such a great investor over a long period of time kind of understanding how the cycle of things are going to work. And when you look at, there's a couple of things that are happening with Bitcoin right now, because this is where we get into not only the trends that are moving in with Bitcoin, but also some of the key indicators that are leaning in either into a recession or not into a recession. And when you look at some of the earnings and things that I've seen, here's a good example of the airlines industry right here. United forecasting a 2022 profit as passengers return and paying more to fly. And we're seeing a lot more profitability. And this was something, look at this, airline expects to fly a schedule of 87% of the 2019 levels, which would, based on their current situation around the traffic, of both passengers, the amount of employees that they've laid off and restructured their business, the amount of equipment pieces that have been sunsetted. All of their business actually got healthier, and now they're capable of charging more for premium product like this, which is going to put them in a profit position. Which you look at these kind of scenarios and earning statements coming back like this, you wonder, how could this be on a pre-recession scenario? And I'm just wondering how all of these things start to play out, especially as Powell starts to look at things moving forward. You also look at what Coinbase CEO Brian Armstrong is talking about, and that is predicting 1 billion in crypto users within the next decade. This is what, to me, just kind of slaps Buffett in the face, is that when you have that kind of adoption cycle, it's like the internet. The amount of cycle of adoption that we saw within the early stages of what the internet was doing, which a lot of people, what would it be used for? Why did you need email? Why did you need, these commerce? All those things were in place. We had those communication systems in place. It has done nothing but create opportunity from a technology standpoint. So the fact that we could see 1 billion crypto users within the next decade, one, is going to be good for Coinbase. And two, I think it's going to also completely revamp the monetization or the monetary system around the planet, especially when it comes to the US dollar and a lot of the primary currencies that are being traded today. So a big one. Coinbase is also the recipient of a Goldman Sachs historic first Bitcoin-backed loan. So again, now we're seeing the potential capability of a company like, well, already happening, Goldman Sachs, probably well versed with how Buffett's strategy has been over the past, 5 decades. And now they too have also jumped in the space of understanding how this can be used as a store of value and hence being a backing for loan securities. Goldman Sachs offering Bitcoin-backed loans was not on my bingo card for the day. This is just, of course, the Wolf of All Streets. If you guys are not following Scott, check him out. Great analyst, but he really understands it from a stock market side of things, a lot of impact of how the traditional markets are flowing into crypto and digital asset markets. So the fact that he's kind of pointing to that, I think, is pretty interesting. Here you've got CNN talking about Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell facing a delicate dance with interest rates. This is something, of course, we're dealing with right now. And this is interesting because former president and CEO of the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, Bill Dudley, breaks down that this is going to be a hard thing to do in terms of a soft landing. And because we have overcorrected, and I think to a certain extent, you're probably seeing it because of the amount of inflation and pricing scenarios that we've already started to experience. The fact that Powell may still implement what we know is going to be another basis point raise to help slow that economy, it is a tightrope of not moving into that whole scenario of a potential recession. But back to my argument with the airlines is if you've got these massive earnings still starting to come in, are we really going into a recession, or are we just trying to soften the investment environment so we don't see another April start to occur, which was down 20%? And I think if that is the case, this will be something that we start to look at from a very, very close perception of understanding how this is going to affect the rest of the year. Here you've got Johnny Wu talking about Bitcoin scamwick, or this time is different. We'll see the results tomorrow. This is just showing how the FOMC meeting applies to what kind of price positions we see right there at the bottoms. You can kind of see these movements. Here's the climb back up, and then FOMC, we're starting to get to it, and here we are setting potentially, could we bounce back up into this range and start to see some new all-time highs for Bitcoin? That'll be a question I think that will continue to be looked at, especially around sentiment. Sentiment to me is still leaning somewhat moderate. It's not as fearful as the fear and greed index is showing, at least on our data, because we're not seeing Bitcoin move dramatically in overall sentiment and amplification. So that in itself is a solid thing. All right, let's pause for today's sponsor, and that is Celsius Network. 1.6 million people call Celsius their home for crypto. Join them to buy, swap, borrow, earn, and send crypto all in one app with zero fees and the best rates. Make sure and head over to Celsius.network to get started today. The other thing that helps fuel this is the investment strategy of the oncoming investors. And who are the oncoming investors? Well, it's not Warren Buffett. It's going to be millennials. Why are millennials running after crypto investments? Let's take a look, and you guys are going to be pretty amazed at this. According to a recent survey conducted by the Spectrum Group, most millennial millionaires have already had a massive chunk of their wealth in cryptocurrencies or think of investing more despite clashes in crypto prices. And of course, we've seen all this over the last few years. Around 41% say the economy will get stronger in 22, while 35% say it will weaken. Survey highlights 83% of millennial millionaires own cryptocurrencies. So essentially, you're talking about a young emerging market. And I think it is also going to the point that they have really shifted their entire strategy around investing. And it kind of shows it because whether it was Gen X or boomers, depending on which millennial you've got, older or younger millennial, they're taking a whole different approach here, because if you look at millennials are ahead of their parents in retirement savings, this argument right here I think is a good one, because of the fact that millennials are way ahead of boomers. Because remember, boomers were still looking at retirement systems that were built around 401ks and a lot of the pension plans that were built into their jobs, which millennials do not keep as long as their parents and or grandparents if they're boomers. But it's not really pointing in that direction. So what they've done is said, hey, we don't think that's going to come around, so we have to kind of make our own way. Hence, I think the strategy around digital assets. So we're definitely seeing a lot more of that. If you look at the statement here, way ahead of baby boomers, and when it comes to saving for retirement, according to the new study, this is by Charles Schwab, younger generation is already stashing away funds in their mid-20s, beating their parents by about a decade, which I think is pretty amazing. A lot of baby boomers felt like their retirement was taken care of. And again, this goes back to my point on the whole aspect of pensions. So it's really just a shift in strategy about how millennials are approaching digital assets. And when you have this many millennials moving into this space, you can imagine how the shift in dynamic of investment classes are going to occur. There's a handful of investors out there. You got Kevin O'Leary and many others, Cuban, and so on. They understand this. They understand the shift in technology and what it means to our society, what it means to a lot of different aspects. And because you have this onboarding of a large community of both millennials and Gen Z, which is right behind them, that will only know digital currency, this is definitely going to be something that I continue to just spout, that this is where the future is. Back to this point right here, they've solved their retirement crisis, and that I think is pretty cool when you look at how they've been able to do it. This is 4,000 people by Investopedia found that millennials own cryptocurrencies more than stocks. 38% own crypto versus 37% who own stocks. That to me is a striking number, considering that these millennials are so much more intent on putting together a strategy for long-term investment. Survey also says they're planning on relying on cryptocurrencies in retirement, said that they were planning on relying on mere savings. So they're planning on this, which is huge. And a lot of them are already looking at potential opportunities of early age retirement, which would beat both boomers and Gen X. Now, the thing here is, and I always kind of say this, is that if you're a millennial, you're a Gen Z, or maybe you're a young Gen X, you got lucky, because the boomers did not have a chance at this kind of market in their high investment years where they were risk on, because now most boomers are risk off. It's harder to get a boomer to go into this market because they've made their money, or they've got their retirement and or their savings or their opportunity. It's usually the boomers who don't have it that are reacting more like a Gen X or a millennial in their investment strategies. So the fact that we Gen Xers, millennials, and Gen Z soon coming up are going to have this opportunity, we are in the right place at the right time. And we've never seen this in the last 100 years. So the opportunity for us is once in a lifetime. It's once in a generation. And I think that's a big factor going forward. Wrapping up here, you've got, this is kind of interesting too. I thought this was intriguing. At $38,000, this was back in 2021, fear and greed comparison, still $38,000. Extreme greed, this was when we were climbing the charts back in 2021. Bitcoin was popping at 38, and now 38,000 at 2022, and everybody's like, whoa, wait a minute. That's the expectation from the market, so much so that even at the price we're talking about, at 38,000. Remember, Bitcoin where it was at the beginning of 2021, 2019, 2020. All these growth factors in comparison. And I'll show you a comparison of Bitcoin versus Apple since 2019 and who the better investor was as well. But you can kind of see it. Just in, future of South Korea finance minister wants to delay the Bitcoin and crypto capital gains tax until 2025. Just more good news because this is leaning in, and Korea, I think, is going to be one of the world powers when it comes to blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies in general. Watch out for Korea in a good way here with Bitcoin. And of course, here you've got Bitcoin Mag talking about Tesla in new SEC filing. We believe in Bitcoin long-term potential, and it's a liquid alternative to cash. Huge. Liquid alternative to cash. Here you've got, of course, Central African Republican, universal money, more and more countries and emerging countries at that, which are the growth sectors of the world's population. A lot of people overlook these emerging markets because they don't understand the growth sector. Remember, they leaped beyond the internet age into the mobile age. And mobile is very, very kind to where Web3 is going to be going. And I have a feeling we're going to see more and more emerging markets become leaders around this whole sector. Then, of course, you've got Jack Dorsey, Michael Saylor, and others who've sent the US EPA a letter refuting environmental issues with Bitcoin. And of course, this is something we all know. You've been following our channel. You know that this essentially is going to be a catalyst to actually help sustainability and clean energy around mining, because it's going to be a better solution for mining Bitcoin. So again, just another big push. Last but not least, I want to get into the chart a little bit, but I want to show you a comparison here. And this is if you had been invested in Bitcoin in 2019 and invested in Apple in 2019. And I just want to kind of just go over here. We'll look at the Bitcoin chart right here. We'll go to, let's go up the chart a little bit here and go to May of 2019. And we'll go to the bottom right here at 566% right here. 566% if we go to today on Bitcoin in May of 2019. Same scenario if you had invested in Apple in May of 2019. We'll go here to May, and there is May of 2019. And we'll go to the bottom right there, 242%. Now, Apple is Warren Buffett's #1 stock position. So if he had invested the same amount of money in Bitcoin in 2019, Warren Buffett might be the richest man on the planet instead of Elon Musk. He would have doubled his investment, just earnings, since 2019. So these are the kind of scenarios to me that just make no sense around some of these investors as they start to look forward and where it's going. Now, the point I look at is, where is Bitcoin? I want to take a quick look on the CPI. We'll jump over to the dashboard, get into our top crypto, and jump into Bitcoin real quick. And take a look at sentiment as it starts to paint out here. Even though it is trending down, we're starting to see a much tighter span right here between sentiment and amplification. Overall market is trending down. All of this, again, is in my opinion, is pre-priced in scenarios toward the Fed meeting as we get a little closer, and I anticipate we're going to see a little bit of a bounce off the bottom. So be watching the CPI on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays when we drop these data points, which is a big way to kind of keep track of how and what you need to be prepared for. Also, we do some custom video analysis over on the CPI as well, so make sure and join. Just click the link below. If you guys are listening in over on the podcast right now, make sure and jump over here to the YouTube channel. This is where you're going to learn all the great stuff and catch more of our insights and analysis. If you want to reach me, it's out on Twitter at Paul Barron. We'll catch you next time right here on TechPath.